Hey there, welcome. Following on from the previous tutorial in which we did the sign in with device, today we are going to be looking at user data. So downloading, getting and setting user data for the account profile. So whether you're signing in with a username and password or with the device ID, we are going to be uploading custom data for that user and downloading it again and manipulating it. Cool, let's get into it. So there is some new UI that has been created recently. This will be used in this tutorial and the next one, just to demonstrate getting and setting and manipulating user data. So over here we have just a quick user profile for level, XP, and a username. So we're going to be manipulating that. And then we're also going to be looking at doing leaderboards and dealing with statistics with Playfab. Cool. So we're going to open up our user account manager script, where the last thing we did was the sign in with device ID, getting the device ID for whichever platform we're running on, and then signing in with that appropriate API call. So log in with Android device ID, iOS device ID, or the custom ID. What we're going to do next is just create some basic functions to get user data and set user data. I'm going to create just a little commentator over here for user data, just to make everything nice and clear. And we are going to do a void get user data. And we're going to do a void set user data as well. We're going to keep these functions nice and sort of generic in a way, where we can pass along a key to get a specific set of user data, because the user data is formatted as a dictionary, so it's key value pairs. So you can determine, or you can say which sets of data you want to use. So we might have, in this case, we're going to do like a basic user profile. So we're going to get the user profile data and set that user profile data, but you might want something else like inventory or cosmetics or whatever the case may be. So our get user data, we're going to give it a string for the key. So this is going to be the key that we then query the Playfab server for and then get a response, the actual data. I'm going to use the Playfab client API once again, as with all the other ones. And we're going to do a get user data call. And we're going to do a new get user data request as it specifies there. Open up our curly brackets. We've got two callbacks that we need to use over here. So it's going to be result or response, followed by an anonymous function and the error as well with another anonymous function here. So we can just handle it all in line, nice and easy. Separate those out into new lines and control space to see what our options are in terms of this specific get user data request. So here we need a Playfab ID, and we have yet to set up any sort of Playfab ID variable. So we're just going to go up to the top of the script real quick. And over here, we're going to do a string for Playfab ID. Now we can get that Playfab ID from the sign-in process. So any of these responses will load up our Playfab ID, or will contain a Playfab ID reference for us. So for all of these responses, let's just see what's the quickest way to do this. Okay, I'm going to double click my on sign-in success here and Control D through all four of them so that I can select them all in multi-line edit. And then just press Control Enter. Playfab ID equals response dot Playfab ID, end that line, and I'm actually going to move it up one just so it's before the event call, just in case I need to rely on that later on once the on signing success is called. So we're just setting Playfab ID equal to the response dot Playfab ID there. That means we now have access to it when we do the get user data. So we can say equals our Playfab ID. And then the next step is to specify which of those keys. You remember I was speaking about the keys there. So we can get multiple sets of data in one specific call. So we don't have to do a single call for each type of data, In this example, I'm just doing one single key, but you can always change out this GetUserData to maybe params and have multiple keys in there. So we're going to use one key. We're going to specify new list of string because that's what it's expecting there. And then we're going to load it up with our key as so. Okay, so we have our key loaded. We're getting our user information. We've given it the Playfab ID. This is all it needs to successfully fetch that data. Now, once we get that data, we need to do something with it. Let's just do a log and say successful get user data. And let's just do unsuccessful so that we can easily see what is happening at all times of our code. Right, we have the response. We can do something with that response. So what we're going to do is follow the same process that we've been using, the same architecture, in that we use a Unity event to broadcast whatever information we've now received. And then any other scripts, UI or manager scripts, whatever it may be, can then handle that data on their own. So at the top here, we're going to create a public static Unity event. And what we're going to pass along with that event is, first of all, the string, so a key, the same key that was passed in. We just need to send that again as reference, so that if we send the key off to say we want user data, user profile, and when it comes back and it broadcasts that event, we can compare the key and say, yes, this is the information that I was looking for. So that's going to be the key. And then we also want to then pass along the value of that, which is also going to be in string format. Since it'll come in as a string format. So it's a key value pair of string on Playfab side. We're going to convert that to back and forth using the JSON utility to and from our whatever saved data class we want to use, the user profile class. But we'll get there just now. So that's going to be on user data retrieved, and that's going to equal then a new Unity event, just like so. Okay, so we've got our Unity events. We can go back down to where we were busy. Once we've got the response, we can just invoke the event over here. And like I said, the first one is going to be the key, and then the second parameter is going to be part of the response. So it's going to be response dot, and if we look, it's got data. And if we hover over data, data is a dictionary. So this is the key value pair. So if you've got multiple keys, it's going to give you a dictionary of key, its value, etc. And I stand to be corrected. It is not of string type. It is user data record. So that is the type. So in order to access this, it's in a dictionary, we need to use the key once again to find that data. And what we're interested in that user data record is this value over here. So then we just go value, and value there is a string. So that's that. We do also need to check though, we need to make sure that we're not pulling in any nulls or trying to reference any nulls. We want to make sure that the dictionary does in fact contain this key. So we're going to say if response.data.contains key, and we're just going to double check that the key does in fact exist in that dictionary. Once it does, that means that this will not give us any null ref exceptions, and then we can access the value in that. We also want to make sure that there is always an event being called. So we can also say still invoke the event, give it the same key, and then just give it null. That way, if a UI script is waiting for a response, at least it can realize that the response was null and then maybe stop whatever UI it was doing, like a loading bar or loading circle or something like that. Right. In the unsuccessful, we don't actually need to handle anything there. We're not going to try and get the user data again, but we are going to log out whatever the error is there. So error.error message, just so we know exactly what has gone wrong. If we do want to implement something else, we know where to find it. Right, then our set user data. We are setting the user data also with a key. So we're doing a key once again, and then we are setting it with a value as well. Same key value pair, both are strings. So this string can be an existing class, which we'll do. And we're going to use the JSON utility, like I mentioned, to convert that class to a string, then a JSON string. We can use the Playfab client API once again. And this time it's going to be set user data. No, update user data, sorry. And it's going to be a new update user data request. Same process all over again. Anonymous function for the response and the error callback as well. And then just go and separate those onto individual lines and take a look at what this request requires. So this request requires the data itself. And if we look at what data is a dictionary with a string. So we're going to do new dictionary, open that up. And with a dictionary, you need to have additional curly brackets because it is a key value pair. And oops, that is going to be key and value, just like so. So we just load up the dictionary with the key value pair, and that gets then loaded up into the data variable there. We do not need anything else. That is it for the request setup. And then inside of the response, we can do the same thing as before. Let's just do a log. That's successful set user data. Same for the error. And then what we want to do once the response is done, well, actually that doesn't matter in this case. We don't need to know once the information has been sent up, we just have to send it. Okay, so we can save that. We've got our access points here for getting and setting the user data. Now let's work on actually using these two functions over here. Like I mentioned, we're going to be using a user profile to get and set a user profile. So back in Unity, we're just going to go and create a new script over here. This is going to be let's call it the user profile script. And we're going to open that up. So in our new user profile script, just going to remove that. And now we need a data container, a class or struct that contains just a template or the structure of the type of data we want to be storing, getting and setting from the Playfab server. So we're going to do a public class over here. And it's going to be profile data. And because it is a public class over here, we do want to make it serializable so that we can see it in the inspector and that we can serialize it to JSON and so on. Inside of this profile data class, like I showed earlier in the UI, we are going to have a public string for the player name and a public float for the level. And let's also do a public int for the XP. Now, the reason the level is a float, you might find that a bit odd, but just for this example, I'm using like kind of a linear progression. So the level, you'll have 1.3, for instance. The 0.3 is the progression towards the next level then. So you can easily then determine what the XP is by saying if the level cap is say 1000, well, let's go with 10, and you're now at level 1.5, then your XP is going to be that 0.5 of 10. So your XP will be sitting on 5 basically towards the next level. Yeah, just a quick little example there. Right, so we've got our profile data class. We're going to be serializing this to and from a JSON string, but we do need to have a reference to it over here. So we can do a serialized field for profile data called profile data. So we can also see it and debug it in the inspector. And then we need to start working with actually modifying this data, right? So getting and setting it So let's do a void GetUserData. And over here, we are going to then reference these the function over here that we've got in the user account manager. So actually these need to be public so that we can access them. And we have already made this a singleton of user account manager, so we can just access it directly through the class name. So user account manager dot instance dot get user data, and then it requires a key. And in this case, our key is going to be, let's call it profile data. And just to make things easy over here, we're going to use a context menu and just say get profile data, so that we can test it directly before integrating it with all the other systems. Just doing this kind of granular testing along the way just prevents having any issues after you've written a crap ton of code. So we've got the get user data. Let's do the same thing for the set user data. So for, this is going to be set user data. We're also going to just do a context menu, and this is going to be set profile data, and we can do a set account manager dot instance dot set user data. Now we need the key, which is going to be profile data, and then the value is going to be JSON utility dot to JSON, and we're converting then the profile data class, so this class over here. So that'll convert it to a string and push it up under the key for profile data. Now we get it and we set it. If we set it, we also then get back, or if we get it rather, we get the on user data retrieved event fired, right? So we want to add a listener to that. We're going to do on enable, and likewise we're going to do on disable, and it's going to be user account manager dot on user data retrieved dot add listener, and we're just going to give it a name right here in line. So we're just going to say user data retrieved, and we're going to then click on that, click the little light bulb and say generate method. So that's just going to generate the method for us. Our first argument is going to be the key, and the second argument is going to be the value. And then we're just going to go and move this down here after the get data, actually. That's more appropriate. So we add the listener, we can duplicate that line, move it down into the on disable, and then just go remove listener. So it is important that you always remove your event listeners as well, otherwise you end up with duplicate event receivers if you restart the scene. Okay, and then when we retrieve that user data, like I said earlier about this key, we want to check if it is the correct data so we can use the data in the correct way. So we can say if the key is equal to profile data, then we can assume that value can be converted using the JSON utility back to our profile data class. And we could say profile data equals JSON utility dot from JSON, and we're converting that to a type profile data, and we give it value, just like that. So we convert the string back to our class type and store it into our variable over here. Okay, so we've got enough here that we can actually test something. We can go and manipulate the data, call the get and the set, and see what comes back. So let's test that. We do need to drop the script onto something, so we can just drop it onto here. Ignore this removed one. That was from previous testing. We're going to sign in with device because it's just quicker. Okay, successful login. And then if we call Okay, we called the set, that did set successfully. If we call the get, successfully got. So let's test the name over here. Tommy, level 3 and XP 3, whatever. Then we're going to go and set that profile data. There it goes. We're going to then go and maybe let's go clear all of this out. So there's nothing over there. And then we're going to call the get. And there it goes, collects, gets the information and loads it back into our profile data class. Okay, so that is working nicely. Back to our script. The next thing we can do is just to daisy chain events. So on successful sign-in, we want to go and get the current user data for that user, right? So we already have an event available to us. So on sign-in success over here, we're going to add listener, and the listener is just going to be sign in. Let's just call it sign in. Go and generate that method. And we're just going to move this below the disable. And once we have signed in, then we're just going to call GetUserData. This is. We also need to go and remove that listener. We don't have any duplicates. Okay, and now if we go and test that, we don't have any information over there. I'm going to say sign in with device. We get successful login, we get the user data, and it's loaded there automatically for us. Nice and easy. Okay, then the next thing, our UI, we just got a quick little UI script that we need to make in order to ramp up this alpha on the canvas group to make all this visible. And we can then also load the information into this over here, the UI. Also, we're going to go, let's say UI, sorry, UI profile. I'm going to remove that. And we're going to say using Unity engine.ui because we are. We need a reference to the canvas group. And then we also need a reference to the text for the player name text. We need one for another text for the player level text. We need another one for the player XP text. And we also need an image for the player XP bar, or let's call it fill. Okay, we got the UI profile there. So we can do this one of two ways. Either we can broadcast an event from the user profile. So the user profile is responsible then for processing all of the user data and then broadcasting further events for UI scripts to pick up off. Or we could get it directly from the user account manager, but I'm leaning towards the user profile handling that rather. So let's do that. So we're using Unity engine.events because we are going to use Unity events again. And we're going to do a public static because we're only going to have one user profile script in the scene at all times. So we could make it a singleton. So we're going to do a static Unity event. And we are going to pass along the user profile, the profile data. So profile data, and it's going to be on profile data dated equals new Unity events. So then we're going to just go and raise this event. Once we have received it, we load it in over here, and we can say on invoke, there we go, profile data. So we invoke the event, we send along the updated profile data, and we are then going to listen to it over here. So in our on enable, we're going to go user profile dot on profile data updated dot add listener, and we're going to say profile data updated. Once again, click the little light bulb, generate that method, and the profile data, we're just going to give it a more suitable name over there. Duplicate that. That's going to be on disable, and that's going to be remove listener. Okay, so once we've got our profile data, we can then go and update the UI fields. So let's go profile, what's it, player name text dot text equals profile data dot player name. Then it's going to be player level text dot text. It's going to equal profile data dot level, and that's going to be dot toString. Level is a float, so what we want to actually do is just floor this, because we just want to have the first value of that, not the decimal placing after that. Keep the formatting. There we go. Okay, then we also need to have the XP, so player XP text dot text the text equals. Okay, so this is going to be the decimal point of that. So maybe let's create some variables over here, right? Level equals, let's go with that. Yeah, we can make a float, that's fine. And then instead of that, we can go level dot toString. For our XP is going to equal profile data dot level minus level. So that's going to get our point value, basically. So text is going to be XP multiplied by whatever our level cap is going to be. So our level cap, that is going to be more applicable, or more appropriate rather, in our user profile script. So let's make this a singleton. Public static user profile, and it's going to be instance, and then in the await function, we're just going to go and say instance equals this, right? Then we're going to have a public int for level cap, or not level cap, but rather XP threshold. Let's go with that. So XP threshold, let's say, is going to equal 1000. So you have to get 1000 XP to upgrade your level. Then we can go and get that from here, user profile dot instance dot XP threshold. And it's not going to be, yes, it is going to be multiplied. And we've got a float variable multiplied by an int variable. So this int, we just want to go and convert that to a float, just in case. Or actually, let's just go and make it a float over here. That's just going to make everything a bit easier. Okay, so we've got the XP, which might be like 0.5 times 1000. That's going to be 500 XP essentially. And then the player XP fill dot fill amount is then going to equal XP straight up. Okay, so that takes care of that. We also need to then fade in the UI, like I mentioned before, and that we're going to do with the user account manager dot on sign in success dot add listener, and let's just call it sign in. Generate that method, leave it down. And then we're going to say canvas group dot alpha equals 1. You can do a whole little coroutine to fade that in, but for the purposes of this little tutorial, I'm just going to set it to 1 to make it visible. All right, so we can go and hook that up. Just to make this a bit more, actually no, I'm going to put it on the right side over here because this is all user data. Although it's not ideal that we are referencing the canvas group from below it. But anyways, level text goes in there, XP bar fill goes in there, XP bar text goes in there, and then username is actually an input. So let's go back to our script quick and change that from a text to an input field. And that still works. Cool. We just need to drag it in. So it's an input field so that you can actually set your username. Okay. Now let's test it. Sign in with device. Successful login. We get the user data. As you can see, it is loading it just perfectly over there. XP is actually unnecessary over here. Sign in with device. We load it up. If we go and change this to like 3.4, set it, and then get it. Okay, now we've got accurate XP representation as well over here. The extra digits over there though, we can fix that in the UI profile script here. XP text. We can just go and convert this to an int like that. Sign in with the device. And there we go. Now we've got 400 XP. We've got the process, or the progress of the XP bar there. We've got the level and the name. Right, so what we can do is these debug buttons for add XP and increase high score. Well, we'll get to the increase high score in the next episode, but for now we can do add XP. So just randomly adding XP so we can see how it actually works. Okay, that is going to be a UI function. We are going to call it from, yeah, we're going to call it from the user profile script over here. So we're going to do a public void add XP. And we're going to just add like a random amount of XP. So we're going to go profile data dot level plus equals random dot range. And we're going to do 0 and why is system? What is using system? Okay, there we go. We're going to do between 0f and 1f. So basically between 0 and 100% of the level. We're just going to add random XP. Once we've added that XP, then we're going to do set user data. Once we set the user data, we do want to follow it on with a get user data so that we can then update all the UI, the profile, everything as well. So let's perhaps in our set user data for our user account manager, set user data, let's introduce another optional value over here for a Unity action. called onSuccess. And let's just set that to null, so it's not always necessary when you call this. And then in the response over here, we can just say onSuccess.invoke. So it's a follow on. So from our user profile over here, if we add XP, we'll also want to pass in a Unity action. And then pass that as the third parameter of the setUserData call there. In our setUserData, once we've got it, then we want to go and say GetUserData. So we set the user data, and then our follow on is going to be to immediately get that user data. Now we want to just hook up our XP button as well. So under Dev Tools, I've got the Add Random XP over there. And in the button on click, we can go drag that in, go to User Profile and say Add XP. Obviously, it's just for testing. I'm going to do the sign in with device again. Okay, there, Add XP. Okay, now we are adding random XP. It's setting it and then getting it as well, and it is reflecting accurately on the XP bar and the level as well. Cool. Now the next thing we can do is just changing the username over there. So that would be another function we can add here for public void set username or set player name string name, and then we're going to go profile data dot player name equals player name, and once again we're going to just do a set user data followed by a get user data. Now we can hook that up to the input field. So under the right side, we've got the username input over here, and under the on end edit, we've already got the lobby reference here. Well, let's just drag that in once again. Under user profile, we can go set player name. Now you have to choose the one under dynamic string so that it actually passes the contents through. And we don't actually need this one because we're just going to do it on end. Going to run that. Sign in with device. Okay, Tommy is now going to be Fred. We got the user data. Fred is now Fred. And if we have to switch that off, turn that back on, sign in with device, we have Fred, who's a level 8 and almost level 9. Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. So stay tuned for another episode focusing on leaderboard statistics. That's it. Cheers.